Tonight, an important clue to the cause of the Gulf oil spill comes to the surface. What the failed blowout protector might tell us. I'm Russ Mitchell. Also tonight, the battle for Congress. Can Democrats do anything to prevent Republicans from gaining control of the House and Senate? Congress is investigating colleges that are run for profit. We'll tell you why. And traffic buster. China's plan to bypass traffic jams that might work in America.
This is the CBS Evening News with Russ Mitchell.
And good evening. It took almost 30 hours, but a key piece of evidence in the Gulf oil spill is now out of the ocean and on its way to be examined. The blowout preventer, a massive piece of machinery that failed to stop the gusher, could hold major clues to preventing future oil spills. Tony Guida has more on the device and the investigation.
Rising slowly from the floor of the Gulf of Mexico, a 1 million pound hunk of yellow metal once attached to an oil well in the Gulf, the blowout preventer that did not live up to its name. Its recovery could be the Rosetta Stone to the worst environmental disaster in American history.
We want to know why it did not function the way that it was supposed to, and second, we don't want this to happen again.
This was America's first look at the complex device that could have saved 11 lives aboard the Deepwater Horizon rig and prevented some 200 million gallons of oil from fouling the Gulf of Mexico and hundreds of miles of shoreline. The blowout preventer was supposed to slice through the drill pipe in an emergency and seal the well. It failed.
It's possible that the wellhead assembly had two pieces of drill pipe in it rather than a single piece, and the blowout preventer wasn't able to shear through both pipes.
Lifting the blowout preventer out of the sea was a painstakingly slow process. It took almost 30 hours. When it was complete, Admiral Thad Allen released this statement. The damaged blowout preventer is now under the supervision of the Deepwater Horizon Criminal Investigation Team and FBI Evidence Recovery Team. The oil industry in the Gulf is treading water since the government's moratorium on deepwater drilling. A BP engineer said recovery of the blowout preventer might change that.
Knowing that we have this BOP stack on surface and the investigation moving forward, we'll be able to better get the oil industry back up and moving again.
It'll take several days for the blowout preventer to reach land. It'll be taken to a NASA facility near New Orleans. Results of the investigation will be of great interest to the many victims of the oil spill who have filed hundreds of lawsuits because of it. Tony Guida, CBS News, New York.
In politics, Labor Day marks the beginning of the dash to Election Day, and Democrats are in full sprint, trying to beat back a strong challenge from Republicans to seize control of Congress. Bob Orr now on the Democrats' plan to avoid catastrophe.
Message to their door.
In Fairfax, Virginia.
Can we do it? Are we enthused?
First-term Democratic incumbent Jerry Connolly is working this Labor Day weekend to hang on to his congressional seat.
I'm talking to many of my colleagues. They get the threat. They understand that there's understandable anxiety in the country, given the state of the economy, but they're prepared going into battle.
Good to see you.
But Connolly's race is just one of dozens the Democrats could lose in a midterm election that appears to be increasingly tilting towards Republicans. The latest Gallup poll has no good news for Democrats. Republicans have a 10-point lead, 51% to 41%, on the generic ballot. And Democratic voters are in the dumps, with twice as many Republicans saying they're very enthusiastic about voting this fall. While party leaders are not conceding control of the House, they are looking to cut their losses by redirecting campaign funds to the strongest Democratic candidates.
We will look at races that we can win. So we make a determination about whether or not those campaigns can be successful at the end of the day.
President Obama, who returned to the White House today from a holiday weekend in Camp David, will hit the road this week to focus on the economy and spell out what Democrats are doing to help create more jobs. It's clear he has a lot of work to do.
Democrats, I think, are rightly very, very nervous, much more pessimistic today than they were a month ago. If you look at the number of races that are in play, it's 60, 70, maybe as many as 80 or 90 seats that potentially could turn over.
But Democratic National Committee Chairman Tim Kaine says voters are just now tuning in.
They start to really pay attention, in that Labor Day to Election Day window, and as they look to make a choice, the choices will be clear, and we think that clarity is going to help our candidates.
Now, while Republicans are content to watch the Democrats squirm, the truth is their approval ratings are just as bad. And today, Senator John McCain warned his party's candidates they still have to give voters a reason to vote for them. Russ?
Bob Orr in Washington. Thanks. And joining us with some thoughts on all this is our senior political correspondent, Jeff Greenfield. Jeff, good evening to you.
Howdy, Russ.
Getting down to crunch time, what can the Democrats do?
They're looking for a blowout preventer to minimize the damage, and they think they got three. One, they have more money than the Republicans to spend in the House and Senate, though that could change. They think that they can localize some of these races to insulate their candidates from the national mood of discontent. And they think that some of the candidates the Republicans have nominated, the so-called Tea Party types, may be too far outside the mainstream. We're seeing some of that in places like Nevada and Colorado, but that's a very thin reed to try to build support for your own candidates.
In real and symbolic ways, what's at stake here?
Oh, I think this is real. One, the Obama domestic agenda is finished if the Republicans, gain control of one House or even sharply reduce Senate majorities. Remember, the Democrats barely prevailed in the Senate with 60 votes. They're also looking with no glee, no happiness to the prospect of massive investigations if the Republicans take the House or the Senate, subpoenas, committee hearings on alleged wrongdoing. So the whole climate shifts for the last 2 years of Obama's term if the Republicans do what the polls now say they may well do.
And when you look at governor's races around the country, what do you see?
Yeah, we see the possibility that in every state but New York, November could result in Republican governors in all of those big states. And remember, next year, all the House districts get redrawn because of redistricting, and governors play a big role. So big gains for the Republicans in the governor's houses means big gains for the Republicans 2 years down the road in the House. It's a big matter.
Going to be a busy few months. Jeff Greenfield, as always, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Overseas now, mudslides from torrential rains have killed at least 38 people this weekend in Guatemala and left dozens missing. 12 people died when a bus was crushed by mud yesterday. Today, many others were buried as they tried to help victims. It is now day 32 since the collapse of that gold and copper mine in Chile. 33 miners remain deep underground, and as rescue work continues, those trapped and their families are getting a glimpse of hope. Seth Doan reports.
"Dad, how are you?" she shouts to the screen. Separated by a half-mile of rock and seemingly a world apart, miners can now connect with their families by video conference. It was a very emotional experience to see him after such a long time, this wife of a miner says. To boost morale for families just waiting and waiting, these former rugby players from Uruguay made a special visit. Their real-life drama inspired a book and then the movie Alive, which tells of their 72-day story of survival in the Andes Mountains before they were rescued. Their plane crashed while headed to a game in Chile back in 1972. The miners are capable of living through something like this crash survivor said, with support and humility. And add to that, life-saving supplies. As part of regular deliveries through one of 3 small shafts, miners are now receiving new clothes and even poles to build small cots. To give you a sense of how far underground they're trapped, compare their nearly 2,300-foot depth with the Statue of Liberty, or the Eiffel Tower, which is just over 1,000 feet tall. Even the Empire State Building appears dwarfed. So far, workers boring the main rescue tunnel have drilled down about 130 feet. Once that rescue shaft is completed, it's estimated it could take around 3 hours to pull each miner to safety. Work on a second and planning for a third rescue tunnel is underway, as officials are driven to find any route to reach these miners faster, as the world watches and waits. Seth Doan, CBS News, New York.
A famous company in Germany has come up with a new, unique way to help its employees extend their work lives. Richard Roth has more on a program that could someday make its way to a workplace near you.
Just looking at its 18,000 workers here, BMW worried the problem was inevitable. It's committed to producing more than 1,200 luxury cars a day with a workforce that's getting older.
You could force them to retire, you could fire them, you could find easier jobs for them.
Yeah, that might be the simple way to solve the problem. That's not the solution we will look for, especially since we don't have enough younger people actually to replace, so it wouldn't even work if we wanted to.
It's happening everywhere. Over 65s will make up more than 16% of America's population by 2020. Germany's aging even faster. More than a fifth of the country will be 65 within 10 years.
Even the smartest engineers at BMW had to accept that an aging workforce was inevitable, but they wondered if a workforce that's less productive might be preventable.
In what the Harvard Business Review called an experiment defusing its demographic time bomb, BMW management tinkered with the staffing on one assembly line so that the average age of workers here would be 47. Then it asked them how to make things better.
That's the new magnifying glass.
That's the new magnifier. It's very simple because older people can't read anymore as good as young people.
Workers said their feet hurt, so the company made them special shoes and put in wooden floor pads. Some got a place to sit. Everyone got a chance to stretch. In all, there were 70 small changes introduced, including lost time. BMW says the project cost about $50,000.
That's nothing. We basically thought it would be maybe 10 times as much we would need to invest.
And it paid off. Productivity went up 7%, and the line's defect rate dropped to 0. Time off for sick leave fell below the factory average.
All the response I've been receiving is, wow, it's so simple, but it seems to work.
So the experiment's expanding to other plants, including in the U.S. BMW doesn't think all its manufacturing can be redesigned to capitalize on an aging workforce. But it's confident that workers here won't just be getting older, they really will be getting better. Richard Roth, CBS News, Dingolfing, Germany.
And coming up on tonight's CBS Evening News, the college she attended made a profit, but she says her degree is worthless and she has a debt of $86,000. No segment of higher education is growing faster than for-profit colleges. Enrollment has shot up from 365,000 a few years ago to 5 times that now. But complaints by dissatisfied students are also rising. Congress holds hearings again this month after investigators went undercover. Here's Wyatt Andrews.
2 years after graduation, Michelle Zuver does not know how her college debt reached $86,000. She was told the cost would be less. And all for a criminal justice degree she says many police agencies don't recognize. Her degree came from Westwood College, a for-profit school with 17 campuses.
It definitely is a false American dream. I can't get a job. I'm in debt. And I'm living at home.
And then I got my cap and gown.
Justin Schulteis, another Westwood student, borrowed $84,000 and also says he was never told the true cost. He describes his degree in video game design as almost worthless.
I feel like I went to Walmart and bought myself a degree.
Widespread complaints like this, overpriced degrees, misleading claims, and an alarming level of student debt led to some embarrassing revelations this year on the entire for-profit college industry, including Westwood, when the GAO went undercover to investigate how 12 for-profit colleges recruited their students.
We have some students who are making maybe $1,000 a day.
And found that every one, 12 out of 12, made deceptive claims and that 4 colleges encouraged fraud. Here, a Westwood sales rep tells the GAO agent not to report a $250,000 bank account in order to maximize his student loans.
Just a FYI, they don't need to know your cash.
In June, the Senate heard testimony on why these colleges recruit so aggressively.
If you excuse the language, putting asses in classes.
Turns out the explosive growth and profitability of the industry, including its biggest names like Kaplan and the University of Phoenix, is being funded by students using taxpayer-financed grants and loans. The industry now educates 10% of all college students, 1.8 million. But those students get 23% of federal loans and grants and are the most likely to default on those loans.
The whole business model of the for-profit school industry depends on taxpayer money.
The for-profit college system does play a critical role in society. It serves older students, workers between jobs, and adults upgrading their skills. But now, to protect taxpayers against huge losses, the Department of Education wants some new rules, including one that would expel a for-profit school from the student loan program until more of its graduates start to pay. The industry is fighting that rule, calling it a penalty for serving low-income students who can't attend state universities.
We are always going to have higher default rates than those who go to much more highly selective traditional institutions.
Westwood College declined our interview request, but claims that most of its graduates have, quote, positions in their field of study. Justin, meanwhile, works in a mailroom, Michelle in retail.
They've put me in a situation where if I'm lucky, I'll recover around the age of 50 or 60.
Westwood tells CBS News Michelle got the information she needed on the cost and value of her degree. But Westwood and the other colleges caught on tape by the GAO have promised to improve their recruiting and give students more information on tuition and the odds of getting a job. Wyatt Andrews, CBS News, Washington.
In medical news this Sunday, scientists said today they've identified a protein that's critical in fighting deadly West Nile virus in mice. They say the finding could lead to possible therapies for fighting the mosquito-spread virus in humans. In the final weekend box office of the summer, The American with George Clooney was the winner, taking in $13 million so far. But for the summer as a whole, the picture was mixed. Hollywood racked up a record $4.35 billion because of higher ticket prices. Actually, movie attendance was the lowest in 13 years. And ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, a dream solution for drivers stuck like this. For the second time this summer, all traffic came to a halt on a Chinese highway. Since last Wednesday, the jam near the Mongolian border has grown to 75 miles. But on the horizon, reports Celia Hatton, there is a traffic buster to the rescue.
Think traffic is bad where you live? Try Beijing, which recently topped a survey measuring commuter pain, and where traffic jams can stretch for miles and last for days. Not surprising in a city with 4.5 million vehicles for 20 million people. But this bright idea called the straddle bus, part train, part moving tunnel, could soon solve real traffic nightmares. Using a mix of solar power and electricity, the bus runs on tracks that can be installed on existing roads, allowing small vehicles to drive underneath. The price tag to build the space-age bus is $7.4 million, and it holds up to 1,400 passengers. The bus can reduce 25 to 30% of traffic congestion because it doesn't occupy road space, explains Chinese inventor Song Yujiao. The idea is proving an international hit with urban planners from the U.S. to India. But it's Beijing where the straddle bus is really gaining traction. Here, desperate times call for desperate measures. A 75-mile backup of cargo trucks outside China's capital has frustrated drivers since mid-August. If we don't stay in line, we have no way to enter Beijing, explains this man. He'll need patience. The traffic jam's expected to drag on until December, when road construction is complete.
In central Beijing, roads to the north, stretching for miles all the way to the south, are packed at all hours of the day. Traffic is becoming a defining feature of this city, creating a major headache for those who live here.
Beijing is investing in public transport. Miles of new subway tunnels, bike lanes, and express bus routes. But there's little political will to break the dependence on cars.
Half of the economy, at least just looking at the numbers of the first half of 2010, was built on auto sales and related consumption.
20 years ago, Beijing was the kingdom of bicycles. Now it's gone car crazy. Still, some believe the futuristic straddle bus might give the Chinese capital a chance to regain some of the peace of its past. Celia Hatton, CBS News, Beijing.
And that is the CBS Evening News. Later on CBS 60 Minutes. Thanks for joining us this Sunday evening. I'm Russ Mitchell, CBS News in New York. I'll see you again back here tomorrow night. Good night.
On television, online, and on the go. CBS News, the most powerful reporting anywhere.